Welcome to our lockdown podcast. We are a flowery duo, and I'm Debbie.
I'm Laura.
So thank you for joining us today. Laura and I are really missing our studio and the opportunity to share with you inspirational ideas and designs, aren't we, Laura?
We certainly are, Debbie, and that's why we thought we would continue our series on Colorstrology in a slightly different format. So just to remind everyone, Colorstrology combines astrology with the metaphysical power of colour to tell us what your birthday colour says about you.
It's actually been quite amusing to see how accurate the Colorstrology has been for friends and colleagues.
It certainly has, hasn't it? So each month we have been focusing on 5 different areas of design. So we've got weddings, funerals, home decor, corporate designs, and just that simple vase arrangement in your home. We create an arrangement from each category in the colour for that month.
Ingredients list for both the flowers and sundries you need. We also include 3 top tips, which I usually explain whilst demonstrating the design.
So this month, it's May, and how time flies. It is actually my birth month, 13th, like to remind you. So this month it's bud green. It's seen as healing and prosperous. It gives us balance, strength, substance, vital and assuring. Bud green opens the heart, rejuvenates the spirit.
So it's a really strong colour then. So do you have strength, substance and balance? This is not directed at Laura. Are you a May baby? Does this describe you? Let us know how accurate it is. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
So Debbie and I are going to take you through step by step through each one of our designs, describing how each one is put together via this podcast. Unfortunately, not through a visual explanation or video, because we can't get to the studio, unfortunately. And then everything you will need to create that arrangement yourself. So I don't know about you, Debbie, but let's get this show on the road. Grab a cup of coffee and enjoy.
So our first design that we're going to discuss with you all is wedding inspired. So exploring with words only how to make a freestyle foliage only Cascade bouquet using a bouquet holder. This will certainly be interesting.
Definitely will.
If any of our regulars are listening to this, you will all know I'm really expressive with my hands on camera. So whilst I'm talking, I'm sure my hands will be moving, even though you can't see me.
That's very true. So this design would be perfect for that bride who loves green and foliage. It represents hope, nature, harmony and fertility. And it also is associated with environmentally conscious weddings, which have been particularly popular this year.
Yeah, definitely. So this bride has strength, substance, and is happy to embrace a foliage-only design.
So the recipe that we've chosen to use for this demonstration includes, so we've got a beautiful mix of different textures, shapes to build depth and interest to the design. We've chosen an assortment of ferns. So we've got asparagus and sword ferns. We've got the beautiful trailing amaranthus. We've got papaver poppy heads, clematis, hypericum berries, and philodendron leaves.
That's such a lovely mix to work with. If only we could be doing this as a real demonstration, hey?
Absolutely.
You'll also require a floral foam bouquet holder, some stub wires. So usually for this, I'd use a 0.71 gauge. And of course, your trusty floristry toolbox. Easy for you to say, got the wrong teeth in today, I think.
Could you in fact use a holly chapel egg for this design, Debbie, instead of a foam bouquet holder?
Yeah, you certainly could, of course. If you're looking to be more sustainable, eco-friendly, you can use a holly chapel egg or even not use a holder at all. So that's kind of depending on your level of experience and skill, really. However, if you do choose to use this method, so I mean using an egg or holly chapel, make sure you use the longer stems, as additional stem length is required really to feed through the frame. Longer, stronger stems are also easier to work with if you're using no frame at all, as they offer more placement and design options. Do bear in mind though, if you use a frame, you can actually stop and start your design, unlike a hand-tied style, which you can't really put down. So if you're feeling a bit unconfident about the design that you're creating, a frame might be the way to go, because it gives you a little bit of more time to think about what you're doing and your placements. Okay.
Absolutely, that makes sense to me. So I'll start with the easy part, because as many of you all know, I am the more computer-based in the duo, and Debbie is the more technical. And along the way, I'll be asking her as many questions as I like. So first steps would be to condition all of the fresh products and then lay them out on the workbench in the individual variety groups.
Yep, that's right, Laura. I think actually that this is the best way and easiest way to start any arrangement. And you're more than welcome to ask me as many questions as you like, as long as it's not too difficult.
I'll try not to.
So whilst you're laying out the flowers, I would also lightly slope the wet bouquet foam holder and secure it to a bouquet stand so it's really easy to work on. Make sure you have your scissors and wires close to hand as well.
So before we start, this might be a really silly question, but would it be worth to have a mirror on hand?
There's no such thing as silly questions. Yeah, actually, really good point. It would be a really good idea to have a mirror. So it actually enables you to see what other people see, especially a photographer. So it helps to highlight where you have gaps or requirements in your design. Actually, we could almost add a mirror to our floristry toolbox for bridal work.
That's a good idea. And another question before we start. Do the design principles still apply to this bouquet, even though it's freestyled?
Actually, that's a really good question, Laura. Yeah, so you still require structure, shape, definition and balance. Although I would say physical balance more so than visual balance on this occasion. So physical balance will make the bouquet easy to carry. If the actual balance is wrong, the bouquet will naturally move to its heaviest point, which may actually affect the finished impression that you were hoping for.
Okay, we don't want that happening, especially for such an important occasion like a wedding. On that note, I have to say I completely miss weddings during this lockdown and flowers.
Oh, me too. The last few weeks have been so very different to previous years. We're really good to get back to normality very soon.
Absolutely, but let's not get off the topic, otherwise we'll be here for hours. So now that we're prepped with all our ingredients and know the type of the design that we're making, what is the next step? So having watched, recorded, edited so many of our videos, put emphasis on the many there, I'm going to assume that we're going to be starting with the length and the outline of the bouquet. Is that right?
That's right, Laura. You've been watching well. You poor thing, so long suffering. If we start with the beautiful trailing amaranthus first, so cut it to the required length and wire with a double leg mount. Now, if you don't know what a double leg mount is, it's simply a wire used to create a false stem, really, which then aids support and anchorage. Both ends of the wire should be equal once they've been wrapped around the base of the stem. Actually, I'd probably recommend heading over to YouTube for a visual explanation, which is probably slightly better to understand than my verbal one. Anyway, once you've created the double leg mount on the end of the amaranthus stem, push the wires through the base of the frame until they appear at the top. Then simply bend the wire over the plastic part of the frame and secure.
Right. That makes sense and not too complicated. Just to apologise, I have got a little puppy, so he might bark in the background to interrupt us all.
He wants to join in.
Absolutely. So getting back to it, why do you use wire, and have you ever used floral glue?
So securing the foliage with the wire actually stops it from falling out when the bride is walking. You certainly don't want a trail of foliage following her up the aisle. You could actually also use floral glue either on its own or instead of wire, or actually in addition to the wire for added security, or if you're using particularly long and heavy stems. So moving on, you may decide that you'd like more than one stem of amaranthus in the tail. So add additional stems now. And then once the amaranthus is secured, you can think about adding sword fern and asparagus fern either side of the amaranthus to reinforce the shape. So use your arching stems to establish form and give the desired freestyle appearance.
Okay, so once you're happy with the outline of the bouquet, where are you thinking of placing the philodendron leaves?
So the philodendron leaves can actually be used to give visual weight to the design. So to do this, add these really close to the centre of the bouquet, both focally and actually behind the placed foliage to help maintain a three-dimensional feel to the design.
Lovely, sounds great so far. So what's next? I'm conscious that is a freestyle design. Are you placing the varieties in randomly, or are you using more of an informal structure?
Okay, so a couple of questions there. So if I start off with what we have next. So next up we have the poppy heads. So I'd suggest that some of the poppy heads are placed at higher levels to the other foliage, which will help to achieve recession and showcase the shapes and textures within the bouquet. You can then add hypericum to create the depth and highlight those poppy heads. And in answer to your other question, Laura, yeah, freestyle design is informal, so the placement is random rather than that sort of defined grouping or structured lines.
So a natural, almost untamed feel?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I guess kind of, as the name would suggest, really freestyle, so kind of going with it, really, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So the poppy heads as well, I know from previous experience that they've got quite a reasonable weight to them. Would you wire them into the design?
I'd probably wire the ones that are going to be placed in the tail of the bouquet and sort of trailing downwards, as it were, and keep the heavier and larger heads more central. That will help with the actual balance. They do have quite a firm, substantial stem though, so they should be quite easy to place into the foam holder.
Makes sense to me. I hope it's making sense to everyone listening. So looking at our ingredients, Debbie, it seems we are only missing the clematis kibo. We have all of our trailing stems in place for the tail, and our arching stems creating our horizontal and our vertical elements. We've also got our focal and intermediate plant materials in place with our poppy heads and our hypericum. So where are you going to feature the clematis?
Ah, well, saving the best to last, Laura. Clematis kibo is really interesting. So they look a little bit like old man's beard with their fluffy seed heads. They kind of add a whimsical touch to the design, so it can be placed within the bouquet to add interest and colour. So look at your design and see where you need that added interest. So the clematis will be absolutely perfect for this.
Okay, and would you do that in the mirror that we have handy?
Perfect. Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so it seems to me that we've finished with the design now that we've used all of the ingredients on our list. Where and how do you store it? Would you leave it on the bouquet stand?
I'd probably suggest actually laying it on a decorated box lid with a hole cut in which you can place the handle. It can then be stored flat, somewhere nice and cool and dark, obviously not below 4 degrees Celsius. I'll probably spray it with water actually to keep it that little bit fresh.
So how far in advance would you make it up?
So the day before will be fine if you're using flowers as well as foliage, because you've got that wet bouquet holder which helps to keep the plant materials fresh. If it's a foliage only bouquet, to be fair, you could even get away with making it a couple of days before.
Just another question, if you were using a egg or a hand tie, how far in advance could you make that up?
The same principle applies really. A hand tied or an egg, you'd still have your stems free, but you'd need to cut them and put them into a bucket of water, but store them in the same place. Just make sure all of the stems do actually reach the water supply.
That makes sense. Would you decorate the handle at all?
Actually, I think it'd be a really nice idea to decorate the handle. The handles on foam bouquet holders are white plastic, and to be frank, really quite ugly. You could cover the handle before you make up the design if it's easier for you. Alternatively, you could use a glue gun to secure ribbon, hessian, or actually fabric to match the bridal theme. This actually help make the bouquet even more personal to the bride.
Thanks, Debbie. I think that concludes our design. So thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. And we really do hope that you enjoyed our first podcast for our Colorstrology series on Bud Green this May. So since we can't reach the studio and create this design physically, and believe me, we wish we could, we felt that this
so much so.
we felt that this was a good option.
Yeah, definitely. I hope we've inspired you today. Do let us know your thoughts and keep those questions coming. And watch out for our next podcast featuring Bud Green, which actually focuses on funeral design.
So we will be describing how to make a grouped monochromatic wreath. So we look forward to welcoming you back again very soon. And it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me. Keep well and stay safe.